Okay, it's 6:30, so we will call the Planning Commission of Tuesday, February 20th, 2018 to order. And we note that there is a quorum of the board here. Actually, the entire board is here, and we welcome our two new members, Randy Miller and Jamie Woolman. Welcome. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from January 9th. And I do believe that we have a majority of the board that was at that meeting, so we can approve the minutes for January 9th. Mrs. Watsons.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the meeting minutes from January 9th as submitted.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, we have a second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. The second item are the minutes from Tuesday, January 16th. I would just like to make a comment. I noticed that under item 1, it did not mention that I would have had to be reminded to open the public hearing, but it's not part of the body of the minutes, and thought that should be acknowledged because there was a public hearing that night, because we did have public that came to speak. It's in the motion, but not separately. And I think that should be an addition. It was opened and closed. Okay. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of January 16th.
January
With the
16th.
change as amended.
Okay, Mrs. Chaffin has made the motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Waxman seconds the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Very good. The first item on the agenda is case Z17-001, the Strasburg Station, and this is Orkley Larson will make a presentation for the staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. Molly Orkild Larson, Senior Planner with the Public Works Department. The County Attorney has reviewed the public notice and has determined that the applicant has met all the public notice requirements, thereby establishing jurisdiction. What's before you this evening is an amendment to a preliminary development plan that proposes a mix of residential and commercial and retail development and will consist of 160 multifamily units, 64 age-restricted townhomes, and 25,000 square feet of commercial and retail space. The 29-acre property is located approximately 1/2 mile west of the commercial center of the town of Strasburg at the southeast corner of East Colfax Avenue and North Piggott Road. The subject parcel is also located north and adjacent to the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. The property is bordered by or near several noise sources, including 2 roadways, which includes Colfax and I-70, and also the Union Pacific Rail line. To determine the impacts of the noise of the site, the applicant did conduct a noise study. During the duration of the study, no trains passed the parcel. So in the absence of noise measurements from passing trains, the applicant used an assumption developed by the Housing and Urban Development, and the applicant will be going into more detail on that study for you. Staff does feel that another noise study should be conducted that measures the noise levels of passing trains or a train, so the impacts and mitigation measures can be determined. Staff has set a condition of approval to address that matter. Based on the findings of the staff report, staff is recommending approval, with conditions. This concludes my presentation unless you have some questions for me.
I just wanted to clarify on sheet 2, under the lot coverage for the proposed residential, it says see note 6. I'm assuming that's supposed to be note 4.
Oh, I have to take a look.
Yeah, I just,
Okay, I can check into that for you.
there is no note 6, so.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question on the noise.
Yes.
If a condition of approval is that it's below the certain decibel level, is that going to be the condition of approval?
The condition is that for another noise study to be done, and that so we can assess what the impacts are, and from there, then it would be determined what the mitigation measures would be.
Okay, so when we actually have a limit in here, I forget the number of decibels.
That was from the study that they produced, yes, and it was like 59.4.
59 and I think 65 is the...
According to that HUD's standards, yes.
So
and
HUD standards. So
Right.
If the noise study is done and it comes above 65, then the project is not approved?
then we would look at mitigation measures that would remedy that.
And I guess I've got some concerns about what you can do to mitigate when you've got a noise level that loud.
You have walls that can be put up. There are certain building materials that you can use, the panes that you put in the windows, building materials, air conditioners can be implemented into the units, and both for the townhomes and the apartments. Vegetation, berming, and associated with some kind of evergreen trees that's been used. So there are different types of mitigation measures that can be implemented.
Okay, so if it is above 65 and they come back to us on mitigation, are we going to have a look at what this is?
We would have to determine what the impacts are and go from there. Can it be mitigated? And if it can't, then we'll have to further analyze
Come
that.
back to the Planning Commission?
Yes, it would. If this is approved, it would go and through the Board of County Commissioners, then they would move on to a specific development plan.
Okay.
So you'd be back for your review with more information.
I have a question. When you mentioned air conditioners, I imagine you're talking about some kind of white noise kind of set up in an HVAC system, or?
Well, my understanding is that you don't have to open the windows, so that helps. But I'm going to pass that on to the developer and have them go into more detail on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have one final one. That has been my concern with this, is the noise. And another thing we're going to consider tonight is this, from the Sheriff's Department, the multi-hazard plan, which has a date of 2015 and seems to already be adopted by lots of jurisdictions, and we're just going to add it to the comp plan. But on page 5, it says you should direct future development to areas with low risks from natural and man-made hazard. And man-made hazards include highway and railroad noise zones. So I feel like this is a confliction with something that maybe we haven't formally adopted, but it's got 2015 on it, and it seems like it's already in place.
No, I totally understand that. Now, there was an amendment, I believe last year, to the Strasburg sub-area plan, and it was approved to add residential to this area, to this category. So it kind of set the ground for residential in this area.
And a sub-area plan.
The sub-area plan.
Is there a way we can see that? Or are we just going to...
You want to see the sub-area plan?
Well, no, I'm just saying if there was something approved that's different than this, that addresses the noise issue, then I sort of feel like we should know what that is before we vote tonight.
So you're saying the sub-area plan was changed last year
Yes.
to accommodate housing and that?
Yes, for this land use category, yes, it was approved by the Planning Commission.
Okay. Well, then thank you.
Okay. And I'm going to turn it over to the applicant for his presentation.
Very good.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Todd Messenger, Fairfield and Woods PC, 1801 California Street, Suite 2600, Denver, on behalf of the applicant, Paul's Corp. LLC. We have the engineer of record, Eric Gunderson from Kimling Horn, and the owner, Brad Pauls, here tonight in case you have any questions of them. And if there are comments from the public that responses are appropriate for, Mr. Pauls would like to have the opportunity to speak to this body after public comment. To address the elephant in the room, the noise, potential noise from the railroad right away, and maybe allay some of those concerns. It was actually 2016 when this body, with a slightly different membership, approved the comprehensive plan amendment to the Strasburg sub-area plan to allow residential uses, attached residential and multifamily, as part of the low-intensity mixed-use zone, which covered this area. At the time that the Strasburg sub-area plan was originally approved in the early 2000s, the notion was that we would have commercial and industrial uses in that area, and that when the market turned around, because we were in the midst of a really bad housing recession at the time, that the body would consider adding residential to that land use category, which essentially is the south side of Colfax, for a good span from the existing limits of development to the east. To the west. And so that's what was done in 2016 in anticipation of a project that would come in to add a variety of housing types that aren't currently present in Strasburg in any material way. Multifamily and age-restricted townhomes are a sorely needed product in the area. This is a great place to put them because they won't be so-called incompatible physically with other uses around. Everything around here is vacant land. To the northeast is a medical center. To the north is anticipated to be in Adams County a town center development of some type at some point, which would be a mixed-use project that would be greatly supported by some density to its southern boundary. The other great thing about this, Strasburg is historically a railroad community. There are a lot of homes in Strasburg that were built essentially right on top of the tracks back when trains were noisy and let out a lot of pollution and so forth. People lived like that because they were convenient to that transportation and so forth. By putting a little bit more density up nearer to the tracks. Now, we're 225 feet away from the tracks themselves to the nearest building. You actually create a noise screen for the rest of the community because the buildings will deflect some of that sound back into the highway corridor and ultimately dissipate it that way. So it's actually a fairly good use for this location. There isn't a market because of the way Bennett has grown up for any kind of intensive retail here. Originally, this was a grocery store project back in 2004. The grocery store moved to Bennett. There is no ability now because of the way grocery stores work to put one here and have it be at all viable. Nobody's going to be able to do that. So instead, we think there's a strong market for low-scale retail, and we can put about 25,000 square feet of retail at Piggott and Colfax in a place where it'll be very convenient to people who live in Strasburg. And then we have places for people who are growing out of their homes in Strasburg to move into, and for the children of people who live in Strasburg to move into as they start their families and grow from there. So these are starter homes and finisher homes, if you will, in a location that really sorely needs that type of product. Everything else in Strasburg essentially at this point is single family, and so it would be very good to create some diversity, and we believe it implements all of the applicable plans. So we'll just take you through really quick. In terms of process, the commissioner mentioned, what's next? Are we going to see this again? The answer is yes. We came in with this application prior to the current plan development program that Clarion helped the county with and put into place sometime last year. I think this was the first application in the chute, given its numbering in 2017. So it's been in process for a little while. Because of its positioning, this is called a general development plan under the new standards. And upon approval of that, we would come in with a specific development plan, which this body would then hear and decide. And that specific development plan would lay out sort of where the development is. We'll give you a preview of that tonight because I'm sure everybody's curious. I would be. And so we'll walk you through that a little bit. And then after that, we'll go for administrative site plan approval. And our understanding of that process is it kind of handles all the engineering and all that kind of stuff that comes along. So we are half a mile west of Strasburg's established commercial center on about 29.14 acres. Molly went through all this stuff already, but this is kind of where we are. This is what the site looks like from the staff report. It's situated between Colfax and UPRR and I-70. Now, those are, big roads, but they're nothing like those big roads in the metro area in terms of the volumes of traffic that they carry. Colfax is a quiet street, actually, most nights in Strasburg. It is a commuter route, but it's not like Colfax is near downtown Denver, for example. West of the site is self-storage. Vacant land is all around in every other area, and Adams County lies north of Colfax. So it's 160 multifamily units, 64 age-restricted townhouses, and 25,000 square feet of retail. This is essentially how the project lays out. At the northwest corner would be a retail commercial pod, and then underneath of that would be age-restricted townhomes. To the east of that would be the multifamily project, and then there's a detention pond, stormwater area that will handle a regional conveyance that goes under I-70 today and then goes under Colfax and reaches out to the north. That will maintain its current course and volumes without interruption, and then we'll be accommodating all the stormwater runoff and treating it for water quality before it enters that system in a way that's not different effectively in terms of volume and location than it is today. So that's effectively how that project would lay out. We're up in this corner, retail commercial, so that we can handle all of the traffic movement safely at an established intersection of a county road and the state highway. So the preliminary development plan is kind of a boring document when you look at it. It establishes the land uses and some of the basic design criteria, and where we really hit the road with this body is in this specific development plan where you'll get to see, these items again in greater detail. But in terms of the current preliminary development plan, it was approved in 2004 for a grocery store, and then we had a final development plan for one of the lots in the PDP, if you will, for that grocery store, and again, we can't do that anymore. So what we've done, and you're not supposed to be able to read this because you have that in front of you, but we added multifamily and age-restricted townhouses as allowable use. We removed some of the more industrial, more grit from the project, if you will, the outdoor storage, the contractor shops, and things like that. This is much more of a lifestyle experience with retail, restaurant, maybe gas station, and convenience near the residential uses. And so we didn't think mixing the industrial with that would be as appropriate. The overall density would be 10.46 dwelling units per acre. The specific densities per project are between the townhomes and the multifamily are listed in the PDP as well. But overall, the 10.46 units per acre is the number for the site, with a maximum of 224 dwelling units. So if anything shifted one way or the other with respect to townhomes or apartments, you're capped out at 224, and that's what the traffic study, supports in terms of the conclusions for intersection improvements and so forth that we'll talk about. Maximum of 25,000 square feet of retail commercial. So we think these are the highlights of the changes that are proposed. And then this is just the standards on the next sheet to promote quality design, the very basic standards for how this development would unfold, what you would expect to see in an SDP. And from the SDP forward, you would then evaluate, how well that stuff was implemented and so forth. And this is the existing condition. You can see there are some drainage easements. There are a number of other things that need to be cleaned up in future approvals, mostly I think at the administrative level, and also at a final plat level will be in front of, I think, this body dealing with issues of, is the final plat is also administrative? Board of County Commissioners, to deal with some of the vacations of easements and things from the original development that need to be taken care of. So in terms of the standards that apply to the preliminary development plan amendment, consistency with the comprehensive plan is important. Policy growth management 1.2, encourage urban development to locate in designated growth areas. This is a designated growth area. This site is within a half-mile of Strasburg's existing commercial center, and the proposed uses have a compact form, as you saw in the proposed site plan. That's appropriate to the Strasburg context. So we're not overbuilding the site. We're building right about the intensity that Strasburg needs to have that diversity of housing product that the Strasburg sub-area plan calls for. Planning for adequate public facilities and services in growth areas. We've got adequate public facilities either present or planned. We're going to make some road improvements. The Eastern Adams County Metropolitan District will come in with water and sewer. They have adequate supply and capacity to deal with the project. All of the infrastructure is ready. Or will be there by the time this site is built. The site is within the boundaries of Strasburg Sub-Area Plan. Strasburg Sub-Area Plan is a part of the Arapahoe County Comprehensive Plan. It was developed in the early 2000s in conjunction with Adams County. It's consistent with the future land use of low-intensity mixed use, which allows retail, office, residential, and industrial uses. The vision of that Strasburg area plan is to provide jobs, shopping, healthcare, and other services to the Strasburg area so that people don't have to commute to the metro. We're providing up to 25,000 square feet of retail and services that people can, avoid the drive out to Bennett or beyond in order to get their services taken care of. and then concentrating higher density housing, shopping, community facilities as close as possible to Colfax. A noise generator, to be sure, but also a traffic generator and a significant regional arterial and a significant local road for the Strasburg area. And this Strasburg Station project directly implements that policy, which was to concentrate, the density in areas where that infrastructure was able to support it. In terms of meeting the preliminary development plan standards, the project recognizes the limitations of existing and planned infrastructure. Water and sewer services are available. The Division of Water Resources has approved the water supply and the aquifer analysis. There's enough capacity in the system. There's enough water dedicated for this project to make it go. There's stormwater detention on the eastern portion of the site in what was called Tract A on the map that we showed. The off-site drainage flows to the north under the site, under I-70 and through the site. And the on-site water quality and detention won't impact that downstream infrastructure to the north of the site. And anticipated traffic improvements when we come in with the SDP and the ASP and we're looking at how all this comes together, we anticipate, based on the traffic study, we'll do 3 new left turn lanes at Piggott and Colfax. There's already one there, so we'd complete that intersection with 4 left turn lanes, widen Colfax through the whole frontage of the site, and create a 4-way stop at Wagner and Colfax to address the condition at that intersection. In terms of compatibility, these are all standards for the amendment. The compatibility with adjacent land uses generally. Strasburg is station is principally surrounded by vacant land. So the project is compatible with vacant land, but it's also compatible with the future of that vacant land based on the Strasburg sub-area plan. The age-restricted townhomes have a synergistic effect with the healthcare uses to the northeast of the site, and the new small-scale retail and commercial space is needed in Strasburg for all the homes that are nearby. And ultimately, if a town center is able to grow up as the plan anticipates to the north, this project will have direct connections and bring in, more than 200 dwelling units for the people that can go and patronize the stores that would be up there as well. In terms of compatibility with the rail, noise mitigation using landscaping and noise-resistant construction is agreed to as part of this PDP, as part of the conditions. And in terms of air conditioners, the question came up. It allows you to use a triple pane window that reduces the noise because it blocks the sound wave as it comes through and attenuates it. And you don't have to open that window if you have central AC. So it's not really a white noise thing, but it allows you to have the windows closed all the time if you wanted to. Now again, the noise study was based on an assumption of 8 trains a day going by at assumed noise levels per train based on HUD standards. And as it turns out, when we sent the person out there with microphones on different locations on the property for 2 days, no trains went by at all. So this isn't a very significant corridor in terms of rail traffic. We'll go out there and try it again. But it's not one where, trains are going by 8 times a day.
Not yet.
No, maybe not yet, maybe not ever. We don't really know the answer to that question. But certainly in terms of housing in the region that's impacted either by major arteries, airports, rail lines or whatever, this isn't the site of greatest concern, I would suggest, in terms of noise. We have lots of much more urban areas in this region in the Front Range that have direct impacts with highways. We have transit-oriented development that's literally built around rail and superhighways, and it's an important part of our housing stock. And in this case, we really need this type of housing, and it meets all of those other planning objectives in terms of being around a regional arterial, being close to town, being on Colfax, being compatible with the small town character of Strasburg. So addressing the noise and more, particularly we have one at-grade rail crossing in Strasburg. It's about 3,300 feet east of the southeast corner of the site. So as the train is approaching that, the train's supposed to blow its horn between 15 and 20 seconds in advance of that crossing. So on its way to the crossing from the west, it's going to be blowing its horn after it's passed. And on its way to the crossing from the east, it's probably going to be more than a mile away when that horn blows. And so it's going to impact much more of the rest of Strasburg instead of this property in terms of the trajectory of that horn. In terms of just the train passing by, the setback for the property is 25 feet from the property line. So all the multifamily buildings or townhomes would be at least 25 feet from our property line. And then on the other side, it's about 200 feet from the property line to the edge of the railroad tracks. So there's a big, wide UP railroad right-of-way there that accommodates, a lot of buffering. The applicant submitted that noise study. No trains were observed over 2 days, and the estimated noise values based on 8 trains per day, based on standardized data, were between 55 and 60 decibels in the worst case, which is well below, in terms of the way decibels work, the threshold of 65. And that's, again, 8 trains a day, which is much, much more than was actually experienced. In terms of public services, we have to provide efficient and adequate provision of public services. All the service providers have adequate capacity and ability to serve. And in terms of the referral agencies, nobody come back with anything of significance in terms of their capacity and ability. Insurance convenience by locating employment, housing, leisure, and retail in close proximity. This is a true mixed-use project. It's got retail and service uses on site. It's got a mix of housing types in a compact form. It's located within walking distance of existing development. It's proposed to provide that mix of using housing types that are not currently in the Strasburg market and are needed in that market. In terms of protecting public safety against hazards, there's no natural hazards on the site. It's not in a floodplain. There's no problems with the soils or anything like that. The noise study will be updated for the SDP, and hopefully we can catch one of those trains as it goes by, and we can let you know what those impacts were. The noise mitigation measures will be provided, and when we have a noise study that shows what the train horn means or what the train driving by means, we'll be able to propose, based on what those numbers are, an appropriate noise mitigation schedule. And in terms of what's being volunteered now, just in anticipation of that, without knowing, is that noise-resistant construction and some heavy landscaping along the southern property line. Again, 225 feet to the tracks, and we'll provide, at UP's request, a security fence along the southern boundary of the property to prevent people from trespassing onto the railroad property. That was something that the railroad thought was important. In terms of providing accessibility and mobility through the site is served by Pickett Road and Colfax, and the internal circulation will be designed in the SDP process. But in the PDP, you'll notice connectivity is an important part of the design, and being able to walk from the residential component to the retail and then access the rest of Strasburg without getting into a car is something that's going to be considered. Ensuring the quality of life by creating a comfortable and aesthetically pleasing environment. We set out the minimum open space by land use, and then Track A will remain open for stormwater detention and quality. The overall openness of the site will be significant, and the arrangement of buildings will be set out in the SDP and ASP, but you've got a preview of what's going in for a pre-app as to those points. And enhancing usable open space and providing recreation. The PDP sets out the minimum open space by the land use, and it sets out that Track A for stormwater. The pedestrian facilities will be provided along Colfax, connecting retail and commercial to the broader Strasburg community, and the connectivity, pedestrian circulation, bicycle circulation are key aspects of the site design, and you'll see those when it comes back. So in sum, the proposed preliminary development plan amendment meets all of the applicable county standards, and the applicant has accepted the conditions that staff recommends in terms of approval of this project, and the applicant respectfully requests that this body recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners. If you have any questions of the engineering team or the applicant, we'd be more than happy to address those at this time or after the public hearing. Thank you.
Can you describe the zero setback that's proposed for the age-restricted housing?
Sure.
Are they going to be attached units or detached?
Yes, ma'am. So they're going to be attached units, and so the side setbacks would be 0 because they could be on individual lots for fee simple ownership.
So how many buildings are you? I couldn't tell from your slide how many in each you pumping.
Let me bring back here we go. So it looks like no cluster would have more than 4. Is that right? Yeah. So they'd be in groups of 4 attached.
So they have common walls?
Common wall townhome, yes. So they'd have a party wall agreement or an HOA, something like that, to take care of that, and then the lot lines would run through the party wall.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions right now? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we will open the public hearing if anybody wishes to speak to the Strasburg proposal. Anybody? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing and bring it back. Are there any other questions?
I'd like to know from the commissioners from that area your sense of this project.
Mr. Brummel.
Well, several years ago we had a case very similar to this. Copperleaf wanted to put high-density housing between Gun Club and E470, south of Quincy. And we voted that down because it didn't seem like that was a good place for high-density housing. In this case, there's Interstate 70, Colfax, right there, a railroad track right there, and there's literally hundreds of other acres that would be more appropriate for residential housing. I don't know why they want to put it here.
Do you know if the train?
I live a mile south of the train track. We frequently hear it. Okay. Depends on the wind and the weather conditions. But there's times it sounds like the train's going right down the street in front of my house. So I don't know I know a lot of people that live in town. None of them complain to me about the noise of the train. So, but I would be more concerned about just the safety hazard of the train and having residents that close.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I live actually pretty far from that. I live on the south side of the county from there, but I never hear the train, but there's a lot of residents that say they do want more retail opportunity there. But as for high density housing, yeah, I would have concerns about living that close to the tracks. But I think that's kind of so I guess that's really all I have.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay. Mr. Chaplin, do you have any other questions for that?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a couple questions for the developer. So it looks like you have a height restriction of 55 feet, so you're planning for 3-story buildings. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And
actually, wait a minute. No, they're 3-story. I'm sorry. Yes, 3-story.
Okay. And obviously I'm not going to hold you to this, but what are you approximating your pricing to be on both the age-restricted and the multifamily?
We have not established that, but it would be an affordable range.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yep. May I respond to Mark's comments? I've been a member of the Strasburg community for a long time as well. I built my first house out there. When I started working on our farm in 1989, I built our first house out there. In 1981, I moved out there and had our first 2 daughters with my wife. And our headquarters shop was right at the corner of Piggott Road and 26th. So just a mile the other way from the railroad tracks. This project, there is a need in Strasburg for this type of residential community. Age-restricted townhomes, we had several meetings out in Strasburg to present this plan to the residents. We invited key members of the community from the school, the bank, church, realtors, and unanimously they all loved the age-restricted townhomes. There was mixed feelings about the apartments, but there was never an opposition for the need for apartments in Strasburg. The vision behind the combination of age-restricted townhomes and apartment living was there is a common element there. Young families, I want to be close to the parents. Kids can go to school in Strasburg, and the grandkids could be close to the grandparents. There's people leaving the farm, not wanting to leave Strasburg, and really don't have an option to buy a place in Strasburg. This provides a solution to all those needs. Also, the obvious need for more retail in Strasburg. Ken Hanks built that retail center right next to the firehouse. That place has been leased up since he built it. There's people in and out of that Cronus restaurant all day, every day.
In fact, the owners of Corona's restaurant have asked me to build them a building in our retail center because they're out of space. So there's an obvious demand for all three of these products: the retail, the for sale residential, and the for rent. Most of Strasburg is for rent now. People don't realize that, but the rental market in Strasburg is quite large. In fact, we're in the process of offering to buy back Wolf Creek Run houses because those folks have so much equity in their homes, they can now afford to buy Blackstone Ranch houses and not put any additional money into the down payment, and they can get twice the size of the house. We're welcoming buying back the house because there's such a demand for rental properties in Strasburg. We're actually buying these back. We've purchased 2, and we would buy 10 more if we had the opportunity. And it's a win-win for everybody. We build up a rental base out there, which is easily maintained because we have folks out there working now. And the customer moves into a brand new house that's twice the size or maybe even bigger than what they're living in now for relatively the same monthly payment. This project, the argument of the project being between I-70, the railroad tracks, and Colfax. Colfax is not a heavily traveled road, especially in terms of heavily traveled roads. I mean, you go to Colfax and downtown, I mean, that's a heavily traveled road. The Colfax out in Strasburg is not a heavily traveled road. There's some truck traffic where that's probably the biggest concern of traffic on Colfax, in my opinion, and we're addressing that with adding 3 lanes to Colfax with full movement intersection. We're slowing traffic down when traffic comes through Strasburg with 4-way stop, and we're also speaking with CDOT about additional lanes at the coming off the interstate. Those improvements are required right now today without this development. We're coming with our development, these improvements will be made that currently are needed in Strasburg. I have stood on this. In fact, I was meeting with Miss Middlemiss, who owns the self-storage right there. And I was standing right there when a train went by. The wind was, granted, the wind was probably in the direction that was blowing the sound away from where I was standing. Truthfully, Mark, I couldn't even hear the train. Now that the train was, the way the wind was blowing, you probably did hear it at your house, south of the interstate. But north of the interstate, it has to do with which way the wind's blowing. The wind blows out there every single day. True. When they blow the whistle on the train, it's a half mile away at the co-op, and it's a half mile away going away. The sound's being projected forward, away from this project. I can't believe you're even going to hear the train noise. Hear the whistle. Well, you hear the whistle at your house, but you and I both know wind direction has a great deal to do with sound travel. Sure. So I could be at my shop a mile north of the train tracks, not hear the train if the wind's out of the north. Same as if the wind's out of the south, I'd be at my shop at Pickett 26th, and I'd hear it just like it was next door. So it's not it's not every day, all day, is what I'm trying to say. So we've gone through a 2-year process to get this far with this application. The county's been heavily involved with every step that we've taken to get this far. We've had multiple community meetings where we even direct mailed. The standard radius of the direct mail, I believe, is a mile in circumference around the site. We went double that to make sure that everybody in Strasburg had an opportunity to show up and see our plans, make comments of what we're proposing to do, and show up to a public hearing. One of the conditions of approval to address the safety issue of the railroad tracks is an 8-foot high fence. Tamper-proof 8-foot high fence with no trespassing signs. That's stated right in the staff report as a condition of approval. We've agreed to that. We don't have a problem with that, and I believe that will address the safety issue of the train tracks. This is a concern of mine as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion or making a motion if we're ready, or I think the input from Strasburg was helpful. I did.
She did.
No, you didn't.
Thank you. I closed it. Mr. Brummel did not have to remind me.
I was troubled by this project the first time it came around, just because I had someone tell me, well, it's from about here to that building over there, and that's about the distance that it is and the width that it is. And I'm troubled by that. I'm troubled by 160 multifamily apartments from 1 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms. That says lots, kids. And I worry about the safety. While there will be an 8-foot high fence, children roam. If they will roam beyond the area where they live. And so I'm troubled. I feel like if I vote yes and the train comes back with we have a loud sound report, and the trees aren't going to be big enough to mitigate the sound, and then you're 2 years into the project, and when you come back with a final plan, then it may get killed at that point. I'm just really troubled by this project in general. I guess I felt it was going to be more age-restricted townhomes. That's sort of what I was hearing last time around. And now it's really flipped, and it's more multifamily than it is age-restricted. And so I'm just very troubled and confused. That's all.
Any other comments? I guess I would echo Diane's comments. I'm not opposed to more housing in Strasburg, but it bothers me that this is going to be entry level and it's going to be put next to the railroad. To me, that's a disconnect. And when I read in the staff report, there are potentially more trains. We do not have a sound report to base any kind of, and another one's going to be done. I feel like it's kind of out of order. So I am very concerned about this hazard, this man-made hazard of locating housing near a railroad. And I love trains, but Strasburg might need housing, but I guess I would like to echo Mr. Brummel. Perhaps this is with children there and the HOA having to maintain the 8-foot fence, or the people living there, I see that as problematic as well. Any other comments? Mr. Saul, do you have any comments?
I guess I just was thinking in Arvada there's numerous residential just as close as this, and they're move up and they're higher price, and they haven't had any problems selling. So
Is it close to the river?
yeah, it's just as close as that.
Very good.
Well, I have one comment. Of course, can't be pinned down to it. I think it's important to recognize when affordable housing is being offered for people in the area. I look at the railroad tracks, and while it's some concern, I remember as a kid going to state beaches in California, and you could literally hop a 4-foot chain link fence and go put pennies on the railroad tracks. And, so the proximity was significantly closer than 200 feet. And it didn't end up being a huge problem for us there. So I guess, it's a bit of a challenge because this is the PDP or, the first step, the general development plan, and I think a lot more would come to light, once we see how you've laid it out, how many homes are subject to it, how is your fire access working if all those windows are triple pane sealed on the back, all that sort of thing. That would be a greater level of detail. But, I guess I like the aspect of providing affordable housing to people who are needing that.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, do you have any comments?
I know that you haven't determined yet obviously you refer to whatever the market conditions were for it would be affordable within the market conditions. Well, you mentioned that houses are for rent now. There are a large number of houses for rent in Strasburg. I'm looking at a 4-bedroom apartment, and I'm thinking, is there an equivalent to housing that's for rent right now that is a 4-bedroom house for rent? Yep. And if that is going to be your baseline for 4-bedroom units, which again implies that there's going to be lots of children.
In terms of affordability, we just rented a 4-bedroom house for $1,850 a month. 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage. It's pretty affordable. The price range for rent product at Strasburg Station will be less than that by quite a lot.
And then again, it begs the question, obviously you're not going to have a ton of 4-bedroom units, right? You're going to look at your market, some kind of market study that you're going to do and estimate demand, right? So you're going to seek to meet what the most common element is in terms of the number of bedrooms in the apartments that are being built.
Out of the 160 apartments, I believe it's single digits of 4-bedroom apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Anybody wish to make any kind of a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion. In the case of Z17-001, Strasburg Station Preliminary Development Plan Amendment, the Planning Commissioners have reviewed the staff report, including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and the public comment as presented at the public hearing. I hereby move to recommend approval of this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to conditions 1 through 6.
Do we have a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Saul seconds the motion. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that 3?
Maybe we should do a roll call.
We better do a roll call. I couldn't tell.
Commissioner Woolman,
I vote for approval.
Commissioner Chapman,
No.
Commissioner Baxter,
Yes.
Commissioner Saul,
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Commissioner Rowe,
No.
and Commissioner Vick.
No.
We have 4 in favor of the motion to approve and 3 opposed.
Correct. Okay. That is the end of the Strasburg Station for this evening.
And Jan Yeckie's Planning Division. Just to note that this application will go on to the Board of County Commissioners for an additional public hearing, that the Planning Commission's action this evening was a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is everybody okay? Do you want a break before we hear the next plan? No. Okay, we're going to move ahead to case number P17003, the Central Park Center, Popeyes, Louisiana Kitchen Final Development Plan on South Quebec. And Mr. Skinner will make the presentation for staff.
Okay. Evening, Commissioners. Bill Skinner for the Planning Division. We have a minor issue with notice tonight, but I think we can resolve it. Typically, notice for a final development plan at the Planning Commission involves letters to adjacent properties. We're good there. And Form A says the sign went up at least 15 days ago. We're good there. And then there's a Form B that comes to staff immediately before the hearing. In this case, the applicant came in from out of town, and we don't have the Form B. As a compromise, this is relatively on my way home. I understand the sign is still there. I feel pretty confident about that, but I will drive by on the way home and confirm that that thing is still up today. I think we can proceed with the hearing.
I think we can proceed, but we do need the Form B completed and executed properly, testing that the sign has been up there. I think it would be helpful. And maybe if the applicant is here and they are able to represent firsthand out in the record that the sign has been up for the requisite amount of time, combined with getting the Form B.
Would we like to do that before the staff presentation?
Yes.
So, Tim, we'll bring the applicant's rep up to the podium briefly. Let me get a name.
Tim Barley, Popeyes, Louisiana Kitchen, 551 East, 900 North, Lehigh, Utah. I did. Go ahead.
Just if you could tell how long the sign has been up.
Yeah, the sign has been up since the notification, 15 days in advance, and on my way from Denver International down here, I did drive by the site, and it was still standing and out there. And I will have Form B executed and to Mr. Skinner tomorrow, for sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Notice how keeping aside. This FDP, the application is P17003, Popeyes Louisiana Restaurant Final Development Plan. As you know, the staff has evolved our planned unit development process. This came in before we made that change in April of 2017, so the fact you have a final development plan in front of you, this may be the last one you see. Final development plan is the second step in the planned unit development process at Arapahoe County. The first step being the preliminary development plan. I know from having talked to the planning commissioners about where many of you live that quite a few of you are aware of the Central Park Shopping Center. This is for Tract A in the Central Park Shopping Center. That shopping center is located on the northeast corner of the intersection of East Iliff Avenue and South Quebec Street. The Central Park Shopping Center was originally brought to the county as a preliminary plan in 1985. It is a commercial entity that's lasted quite a few years when many come and go. Now, it's showing its age a little bit. I talk to the ownership of that shopping center regularly. They have established a rapport with me, and they'll email or call directly when they're like, hey, we got a coffee shop, can we do this? Then we'll talk about it, and that idea wasn't quite so feasible, or, hey, can we do this, that, so forth. The plan was amended as recently as, let me find it, last major amendment was done in 2010. So staff feels this demonstrates the ownership now is committed to trying to keep this a going concern. Having said that, Pad A, Tract A, it's known under two different names, It's vacant. There are pictures in the staff report. It is just parking area. It's surplus. It's not even required for the shopping center by their original PDP, but waiting for someone to come through and develop it. Sounds like Popeyes is the development, and kind of pleased to see that they were going to take Tract A and develop it out of the ground as opposed to try and turn one of the other properties, because that means the shopping center can't keep its buildings filled. The fact that they're adding a new building to the site seemed pretty good. So, having gone off track a bit, proposals for a Popeyes restaurant. It's an established chain in the United States. They're talking about a 2,297 square foot restaurant on a 1.15 acre lot. I've gone into the PDP a little bit. The original 1985 PDP is very specific about the uses that they thought should be approved for this lot. Restaurant is one of them. Required me to go back into the 1984 or 85 code book because, oddly enough, it references the code at a very specific point in time, and that restaurant use is there. We keep those books around, obviously. So the staff finds, or the case manager finds, that this complies with the underlying PDP, including some very unique, specific, and I would say unusually specific parking arrangements that involved parts of Tract A supplying specifically 8 spaces for other parts of the PDP. This FDP not only has enough for its requirement, it also supplies enough for those 8 supposed to be shared, but they could stand exclusively spaces, and then there's a few more to boot. So felt pretty good about meeting that. They meet their open space requirement, they've met their parking requirement, they comply with the underlying PDP. The PDP itself complies with comprehensive plan and the underlying sub-area plan. And I think that's all that I'm going to, or all that I should say about complying with existing regulations. Staff is fine with the site design. Staff also is fine with the building design by and large. The signage proposed on the building is a little larger than what staff would allow under our traditional standard land development code sign regulations. However, being a final development plan, the board has the opportunity to approve something in a PUD that does not specifically comply with what's under it. We look at specific situation in this case, given the distance from the road, given what they are and are not adjacent to. I think the signage that they've proposed works on the site and isn't overly cumbersome. I also looked at the existing restaurants on the site south of here, and that building, despite not being documented anywhere, has pretty similar signage. So I didn't really feel like I could, for lack of a better term, drop the hammer on this one when we have other ones on site that are doing something and what they are proposing isn't really egregious. Public outreach.
Yeah, just a quick question for you on that, Bill. So because it is a franchise, or its decor is dictated by, I'm sure, the Popeyes chain, are they required to have a certain size sign?
Don't know. We can ask Tim about that in a little bit. I do know when we had a similar situation with McDonald's, there was some give and take negotiation, and we worked that out. Now, having said that, that McDonald's was right up against a road, and they were asking for something pretty significant. But even with a franchisee arrangement, sounds like there may be some movement. But that's a different company, different corporation. We can ask.
Okay, thank you.
Public comment on this? Didn't hear anything back from the public. Heard a lot of positive things back from the staff. Excited to have one, just generally coming into the county in an area where we go and drive around a fair amount. And even though it's not in your staff report because it's incidental, and we don't include no comment letters, the professional reviewer for CDOT was quite enthusiastic after their no comment for what that may mean. We have 3 conditions. The first one is the standard stock condition you're used to seeing in staff reports about addressing staff concerns. The second one, the Cunningham, now folded into South Metro Fire District, provided about a 4-page letter of very specific technical direction. They're not saying they have a problem with this. It's just part of going through that there are still some things to be met. This may include pieces and parts inside the building as well as outside the building. We absolutely will tie that down before we get to the board. This has become more of an issue recently where the fire district is responding directly to the whole process that includes building permitting instead of uniquely to the zoning approval. But I'll reach out to I think her rank is Lieutenant Amanda Sevilla, and we'll get a letter or an email from them saying, yeah, we're okay, county, go on ahead. We'll work out the rest of it with the applicant. Condition 3, Excel has a transmission line right-of-way that encumbers part of this property. The applicant has a response from Excel saying, nope, we've re-reviewed it, we're okay. That didn't come in time to make this report. It will be included as this goes forward to the board. One thing to note, some of these preliminary development plan, final development plan combinations can go to the board on consent as a streamlined item. The age of this PDP doesn't allow it, so we will have a public hearing at the board. If there's anything that you want staff to readdress at that time in front of the board, we have the opportunity. I think that's it. Staff recommendation going forward is for approval. The applicant is here. Staff report has most everything you'd need for this in it, so we don't have an additional presentation, but certainly room for questions. And as far as I can tell, we don't have any public in the room, but I may be wrong, so we'll see what comes out of that. Any questions for staff?
Do you know what the vacancy rate is in this strip center? By any chance, since you seem to have a relationship with the owner?
No, Commissioner, I'm afraid I do not. Anything that I see is just based on going by and looking at the storefronts. I lived in the area, used to use this shopping center, but not for at least 12 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Skinner. The applicant, would you like to make any comments?
I don't have any comments, but I'll answer questions if you have.
Please come forward. Restate your name and address.
Tim Varley, 551 East 900 North, Lehi, Utah.
Are there any questions? Is this do you have a plan that when you build a Popeyes, it's the same everywhere? Or is it tailored at all to the whole environment?
Yeah, obviously for the marketability, we try to maintain the brand standard or the look. That way when you see the commercials on TV and you're going from place to place, city to city, across the country, you're getting the same thing. But more of the new age development criteria that we run into, we have to conform and comply. And we're open to doing so, and we have in many jurisdictions. Austin, Texas is probably the toughest to deal with. So regarding signage, facade, anything that comes up that the cities, counties, want to see us maybe conform more with or comply with their standards, we're open to, and usually just put up a couple recommendations and have you guys choose the one you like best and move forward from there.
I did note that your landscaping looks vastly improved compared to what is in the remainder of the shopping center. Maybe you will be a good influence.
I'm hoping it's going to be a great addition to that area. And just if you guys are out and about, we just opened one on North Colorado Boulevard and I-70, right up there. So that's the latest one that we've opened that has our brand standard color signage. So if you're in the neighborhood.
What are your colors?
They are the yellow, red, green would be the standard, and then we have either stone or brick as a complementing to the EFIS stucco systems.
I'd just like to comment, I think knowing this area and living near this area, I think the addition of a restaurant will be a huge improvement. There's a lot of multifamily and not a lot of restaurants, shops, or supermarkets in the area, so.
Well, the demographics say we should do well, so I'm hoping that.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, I guess we will open the public hearing. for Popeyes, and is anybody here that would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the Planning Commission for comments or a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Very good. Mrs. Chaffin?
Yes, in the case of P17-003, Popeyes Louisiana Restaurant, FDP, I have reviewed the staff report, including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and any public comment as presented at the hearing, and hereby move to recommend approval of this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to the 3 conditions.
Do we have a second for the motion?
Second.
Very good. Just forgot your last name. Jamie Woolman has seconded the motion. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right. We have one case to go, the Sheriff's Hazard Mitigation Plan, case number LR 18001. And I guess Mrs. Yakis is going to help us out.
Jan Yeckes, Planning Division. I sent you the staff report, but the stars of the show are here behind me. Nate Fogg and Ashley Capel with the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, and more specifically, the Office of Emergency Management. So, as Ms. Rick noted earlier, the Hazard Mitigation Plan has actually been adopted by the Arapahoe County Board of County Commissioners and a number of other jurisdictions as well. I will let the Sheriff's Office staff explain kind of what that process was and what they went through, but what we will be undertaking at a future public hearing is whether or not to adopt the Hazard Mitigation Plan as an element by reference as part of the comprehensive plan. You might recall we just very recently did that with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, which is another document that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners a number of years ago, 2010. We also adopted the Transportation Master Plan and the Open Spaces Master Plan. Those also were documents that had been previously adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. And those are adopted by the board for various reasons. Sometimes it's because there's a capital element or a funding element, or in this case, there are multiple jurisdictions involved. The reason we look at incorporating these as elements of the comprehensive plan is really to kind of put all of those planning documents into one place and call to the attention of land developers or citizens or property owners that there are multiple pieces to developing within Arapahoe County, and that there are multiple things to look at. In addition to the comprehensive plan, we have our sub-area plans. We have these other plans that I just mentioned, and that calls that to their attention so that they're aware of that and can consult with staff if necessary and see how these apply to their project. This is a little similar to our land development code. We reference a number of documents in our land development code that are also used in processing land development applications. Those are various engineering standards or other manuals that also apply in addition to the land development code, as well as state statutes that the county abides by. So that just gives you a little background about why we would consider this as a potential amendment to the comprehensive plan and why we think it would be valuable to adopt this. As far as understanding what the plan is, how it was developed, how it's used, I think the Office of Emergency Management staff could best explain that for you.
That's a good question. So, in this, we incorporate this. It contradicts the decision that was made last year about this Strasburg project that we just looked at this evening. In that it says the county will direct future development away from known hazard areas. So what trumps what?
So being part of a number of the directives from this plan are actually incorporated into our comprehensive plan that you just approved a few weeks ago and just became effective. We have a number of aspirational goals and policies and strategies that are part of the comprehensive plan. So we look at those as part of a total package. So is this necessarily in direct conflict? Maybe yes, maybe no. I think when you look at an urbanizing area or an already urbanized area in particular, it becomes more and more difficult to avoid anything that might be considered a hazard, whether it's noise, whether it's the risks of airplanes landing in an airport. Could they fall out of the sky and crash on your house? A lot of people around here are at risk of that. There are a whole range of things that could be considered hazards. So as part of that total package, I think our responsibility is to look at what those potential hazards are. Is it reasonable to say, no, you can't develop here, or you can't put a particular type of development there? Are there some things that could mitigate those hazards? For example, we have the airport overlay zones in the Land Development Code. We have worked to keep most new residential development outside of certain zones within that airport overlay. However, there are a lot of businesses where people go to work every single day, and we're sitting in one of them. So there are days that, most days I don't even notice the airport. There are days it's hard to breathe around here because of the climate conditions that particular day makes the air pollution really bad from the airport. There are days that the military is flying exercises out of the airport and it's absolutely deafening. And you wonder if they're coming through your windows. So it's kind of difficult in the environment that we live in to completely avoid hazards. I think it becomes especially important when we're dealing with things like floodplains or things that are just reasonable to try to design. Should we be designing residential development some other way? City of Centennial doesn't necessarily agree completely with our policies on where to locate residential. So they have approved some things that we might not have. The Bellagio development was approved in spite of that overlay zone. So, do we hit the mark 100% of the time? No, we don't. But I think it's our responsibility to look at things carefully and say, is this a reasonable risk? Are there ways to mitigate the risk? Are we being responsible in making land development decisions? Does that help?
Who gets to be the hazard cop? Who gets to define whether it's a hazard or not?
I think that's partly a joint process of reasonably intelligent people and, reasonably educated people. Some of us are professionals, but, we're not experts in everything.
I see lots of things here about determining where development can be, low risk. All that sounds to me like if somebody's going to be a hazard cop, we're going to take away your property rights because we think you have a hazard.
And so I think that's why we have this process. I think that's why we have this process where you can apply regardless of what the comprehensive plan says. You can apply regardless of what the hazard mitigation plan says. And that we can take the tools that we have, whether it's experience, whether it's property rights, whether it's codes, whether it's mitigation opportunities, and that we do the best job that we can to make good decisions. And we may not always make the perfect decisions, or we may sometimes say the benefit outweighs the risk as far as we can determine.
If I read this right, most of the hazards are natural hazards. Thunderstorms, snowstorms, tornadoes. They are not predictable. No one's going to be able to predict those. So how do you apply those to land use?
About the only thing we can do is we can look at building codes, which are outside the purview of the planning division. Those fall under the building division. So we have some building codes that, should help with some things like snow loads, on a building as to whether that's a barn or whether it's a home or whether it's a business and who's occupying that and how much of the time.
Have we already done that?
Yeah, we have. And then we have flood zones. Sometimes those get remapped, but we have regulations on how and when and where you can develop in a flood zone.
We have a giant federal bureaucracy that spends billions on that. We're not going to redo that.
No, but those are things that are already built into our regulations, actually. And so, no. What do we do about a tornado? Probably not a darn thing.
I mean, I'm just concerned that at some point in the future somebody's going to come up with this plan and say, you can't do what you want to do on your property because somebody in your county sitting over on Prince Street says there's a hazard here and might snow here next year.
Hasn't happened yet. But we have discussions like we had here tonight, in that case, it wasn't a natural hazard. It was a man-made, potential hazard. But then there are benefits to locating, near an interstate where people are trying to commute to work or trying to get to places, as well as some risks. So a lot of it boils down to you can't regulate everything to perfection. We just kind of take all the tools in our toolkit and use them to the best of our abilities, and hopefully we make some good decisions. But I'm not the hazard mitigation expert. They're here. Maybe they can give you a different answer.
Good evening, Ashley Capel with the Office of Emergency Management. If I may, I'll kind of take you back to the history of this project and the components and all of our stakeholders that we have involved. It took us the better part of a year to complete this plan. You'll see it's quite a lengthy plan. There's different sections, and we go through each section with each one of those stakeholders. So this is not just looking at unincorporated county or a particular city or municipality. We bring everybody in, and everybody have their own respective piece of the plan as well. So it's not looking at just, on average, we see that there could be a tornado in Arapahoe County. But when we look at our eastern side, the probability or risk could go up. So it's a little bit different depending on the municipality that we're looking at. We also brought in the public, so we had multiple meetings. So it was more so to, I think, educate and inform residents about the potential hazards and the methods that they could use to mitigate some of these hazards. We don't, like you said, we don't know that these are absolutely going to happen, absolutely not going to happen, and what that level of impact might be. But if we can bring the educational component to it, again, it's not regulating them from doing anything in their land, but we can maybe, push that side. So whether it's wildfire mitigation, so encouraging that process to have a defensible space around your property. With the municipalities, we have projects that were assigned, so they were required to have a mitigation action per municipality to even be eligible to adopt this plan with us. So every year we get together, we have this long list of mitigation actions, and we look through and see what the progress is. And it encourages that collaboration between municipalities to look at, this is the project that we could do, it's going to impact our citizens in a positive way. So it's just encouraging that piece of it. Yes, there is a component that could bring in the building codes and the land use codes, but our big focus, it's all natural hazards in this plan. We weren't looking at any of the other, what could be considered a hazard, so we look at anything that was possible in Colorado. We looked at that, and then there's a score based on historical, current, and then an individual survey. So that's all compiled into this risk analysis category. So our big proponent was just, again, educate, inform, and if we can bring mitigation, it lowers that risk. It's not going to eliminate it, but if we can make things a little less difficult when that blizzard does hit, when that tornado does hit, when that flood does hit, we've involved the public and we've involved all of our stakeholders at government level as well to just bring that population together through kind of a cohesive and collaborative method through this plan. So that was our kind of our historical goal over the better part of a year to get to this process. Any questions about the planning process for us?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Nate Fogg, the emergency manager for the county and lieutenant at the sheriff's office, wildland firefighter, and overseer of hazmat for the county. To your point, for no hazard tops, I guess I would be the closest thing to a hazard top that we have. It's pretty close, pretty close there. There's nothing binding in this plan. All of the people who adopted it are not bound to do the things that they said they're going to do. There's no enforcement mechanism to it intentionally. The second point is funding, right? There's a stream of federal funding that is available. I think Bennett is probably one of the first ones to take action on that and to try and finish their stormwater master plan. So by saying, hey, here are the hazards that we've identified, and they're all pulled from data. It's all measurable data. It's not us guessing. There was that component. There was some guessing involved. We brought in our fire chiefs from the corridor. We brought in Chief Rose from Cunningham at the time, law enforcement partners, our flood partners from Urban Drainage and Sims Law. Hey, rank what you think are the hazards. And then that was vetted against the data, the historical data for fires and those sorts of things. And ultimately where a lot of people start having problems with this plan is that when we get into climate change. That's a politically charged issue. We don't debate the politics of climate change in the plan, other than to say it's observable through time. At one point there were palm trees in Colorado, now there are not. Something has changed. That's the essence of the climate change that we account for here. And that's addressed by saying we need to do things like water planning. Make sure, just like we heard about at Strasburg Station, there's enough water available. The other things we're concerned about, wildfire mitigation, particularly on the plains. It's nothing to burn up 1,000 acres in a couple of hours. Tornadoes, things like that. We want to encourage sheltering. Frankly, the I-70 corridor has one of the better sheltering networks in the county. The west side is not in good shape. We close at Airport, we close at Burlington during the big storms. We're due for one next month. Every March the last 2 years, we've closed I-70 and we end up sheltering people from Wyman all the way to Foxridge Farms. So those kinds of things in future development, if we can look forward to them, say, hey, this is a potential problem. We know there's data to back it up. Let's encourage development to do these things to help try and mitigate it.
Any other questions? Thank you. So we do not need to take an action on this. This was all informational, educational.
Jan Yeckes again. No, you don't have to take any action. If you have additional questions that you would like us to Be prepared to answer for the public hearing when that comes up, probably about a month from now. If you could just let us know what those are, we're happy to do research if needed, or just be prepared to include those in the staff report, or be prepared to address it during the public hearing. If you have questions now, we're happy to just jot those down, even if we can't answer them. If you have issues that you would like to discuss among yourselves, today is an opportunity for you to do that. But we'll basically come back to you with another staff report that's very similar to what you got for tonight. And then if there's anything else that we can address for you, we'd be glad to try to do that. Thank you.
I guess that is the end of our meeting, so we will call us adjourned.
Every